What's up YouTube? Cody Bidlow with SprintingWorkouts.com coming at you with another video. When it comes time to get off the couch and get into your off-season and preseason training for your next competitive year, you got to start considering, how can I progress from where I am now to where I need to be to achieve my goals? And that's what we're going to talk about in this video. To improve in something like sprinting, we need to be pushing the boundaries of what our body can handle so that we're flipping certain switches and kicking in certain mechanisms that allow the body to adapt to the stress that we impose upon it. If all we ever do is keep the workload the same or make it too easy, then we're not stressing the body enough to get it to dedicate resources and energy in the direction that we want it to go. On the flip side, if we progress too quickly, we do things too intense straight out the gate, lift too heavy on day one, well, aside from risking acute injury, the other thing that we're doing is we're sort of putting a ceiling on how much we can improve throughout a year or throughout our career. So if we look at this chart here, you can see we have different phases, we have different categories within each phase that we want to target, some example workouts and some notes. We'll go over this briefly. You can pause the video, look at them in more depth if you want. The progressions that we have listed for sprint training are going to be the surface that you're on, the footwear that you're wearing, the emphasis of the sprint work, the emphasis of the endurance work, the emphasis of the resisted sprints, and the rest periods. So in phase one, because we're trying to really just get the athlete back into shape, build a little bit of a base that they can then progress from and, just get them used to sprinting again, the focus is going to be on using flat grass, grass hills, or turf. We're going to focus on using running shoes and maybe some barefoot runs if it's safe, but it can be very risky, so you got to do that, with caution. The sprint work is going to be focused on upright sprinting. You might think to yourself, shouldn't you start with acceleration? I think A, you're always accelerating no matter what you do, and B, you have to know where you need to get for acceleration to be worth its weight in salt. So if we work on upright sprinting first, we can give the athlete the context they need, so when they do hard acceleration training after this initial training period, they know where they need to get posture and position wise, and they'll probably accelerate better because of that. If they can't figure out where they need to get and then they get stuck, it's just not going to be good. So I like to start with upright sprinting earlier in the year and then bring in the acceleration shortly thereafter. The endurance work during this time of year would be focused on extensive tempo. We don't want to hit them too hard with a bunch of intensive tempo, speed endurance work, all that. I'd rather hit some sprinting capacity work, which is going to be bordering on short speed endurance but not quite, and then extensive tempo so that we can really build that true cardiovascular base. I know you might be thinking to yourself, well, we're sprinters, what do we need that for? I think it's really good to just be generally fit as you start the year. It's not that you need to do them all the time, but you should be able to, if that makes sense. Last but not least, the rest periods during phase one would be the shortest. The workouts might look like 3x40 on hills, 3x70 on hills with walk back rest, followed by a body weight hopping and core circuit. You could do grass sprints, 10x50, maybe those would be at 85-90% on flat grass, followed by some bounds, alternate leg bounds and straight leg bounds for 3x40. And then an endurance workout for this phase might be extensive tempo, 2 sets of 3x150. These would be performed at 2 times your 100 PR. So if you run an 11-second 100, you do these 150s at 22 seconds. Follow that up with a med ball general strength circuit, you'd be good to go. Strength training during this period of time would be similar in that we want it to be mostly general. Here the categories that we're going to look at are a little bit different. So the primary goal here would be to develop strength and strength mobility. I would say general strength. The exercise selection is going to be highly varied so that we can expose the athlete to different directions, different types of stances, all kinds of different positions, so that we're building that wide ranging holistic base upon which they can then get stronger and more powerful later in the year. The plyometric emphasis during this time would be low amplitude hopping, just getting used to landing mechanics and getting that quality on and off the ground movement. We don't want to go for very intense movements, very high depth drops or things like that yet. We want to first get the skill of landing and build the tissue resilience to be able to land and come off the ground a bunch of times. Build that early so then later you can intensify and make the plyometric training more specific and more fun. Rep schemes would be 4 to 6 reps on main lifts, 8 to 20 or more on accessories and circuits. Special exercises, we'd really want to focus on prehab and some local hypertrophy in the hamstrings, calves, hip flexors, lower abs, areas that are important for sprinting. We want to target them, prevent injury, get them strong, and just get them used to working so that later in the year, as we keep working, doing sprinting, and we get away from general strength lifting work, that we have this base of strength and resilience built in these certain areas that are really important, so we don't get injured. And last but not least, once again, shortest rest periods during this time of year. So for phase 1 lifts, we might be looking at split squats, reverse lunge, RDL, high box, step up, heavy sled pull, things like that. Circuits, we could use overhead squats, squat and press with a med ball, hip flexor cycles laying on your back, eccentric leg lowering laying on your back. You could do these body weight or with a med ball. And the plyometrics, we'd want to do double leg, single leg, or split leg hops, low amplitudes, you're not jumping very high. Lateral hops, bounds on grass, step up jumps, things like this. For phase 2, we're going to start to switch things up, go a little bit on flat grass, a little bit on the track. Footwear is going to incorporate both running shoes and spikes. Sprint work will focus on acceleration, speed, intensive tempo, and glycolytic short speed endurance. So that's going to be short speed endurance runs with short rest in between. That's what GSSE is. We're going to introduce crouched starts, so that way, we can start to get closer to using blocks. We're not quite there yet, but while in phase 1 you just want to be doing starts from maybe a 2-point stance or an upright position, in phase 2 we could start working on things that are getting closer to specifics. That might be a 3-point stance, might be a 2-point stance but you're curled over and sort of rolling into that start, or it could be a 4-point stance without blocks. All of these things are fine. You just don't want to go blocks every single day starting with the same leg every day of the year, because that's a really good way to hurt your hips, or just get too used to that and stop adapting, stop improving. The resisted sprints during phase 2 would go from heavy marching like they were in phase 1 into heavy sprinting. An acceleration workout in this period might be 3x3x30, so we're doing short rest in between the reps, longer rest between the sets, and this is focusing on acceleration capacity, so you can build that battery so you're able to do a bunch of accelerations in a workout and not get tired. This is going to help you later when you're doing accelerations with full rest, or you're doing speed training with full rest. Having that built, having that capacity built, will help you when it comes time to intensify and to do more, high speed acceleration. You'll have the work capacity to handle it if you do this acceleration capacity earlier in the year. For speed, we'd be looking at things like 3x50 and 3x70, but with a relaxed acceleration. So you might start out at 90%, increase 95, and then 100% when you hit that last 20 meters or 30 meters. These could be done with flying sprints as well. It's just at this part in the year, I think relaxed acceleration is a little bit better. Later in the year, we can get into doing really intense accelerations as we get closer to competition in these speed training workouts. You might follow that up with hurdle hops or something like that, just to give another speed-related stimulus. An endurance workout during this period of the year might be an intensive tempo workout. Could do 6 to 8 reps of 80 to 150 meters, depending on what you feel comfortable with. Relatively short rest, fast enough to where the technique feels like sprinting, but slow enough to where you're not truly going 100% the whole way, and you could do a good number of reps. This will help blend into speed endurance training and special endurance training, so you don't need to do a whole lot of intensive tempo, but I think you should be doing it at some point in the year just as a way to get from the extensive tempo to speed endurance. We have to bridge that gap. Intensive tempo is the way to do it. These would be sort of that 75 to 85% range of intensity on these intensive tempo runs in phase 2. You might follow up that intensive tempo with endurance bounding, so you could do 4x100 meter bounds. It could be 4x60 meters, but with a weight vest, doing something to where it's related, it's still an endurance related activity while also being relevant for sprinting. We have the elastic component in the bound, the distance gives it an endurance component. We're able to do a little bit more of an endurance stimulus without actually running more. So this fits in well to this type of workout. In phase 2 of the strength training, the focus is really going to be on developing maximum strength. So it's not that we're going to max day 1, but we are going to get into those 70, 80, and up into the 90% ranges of intensity with the load on the bar. We're going to use moderate variation and more stable exercises. So instead of using just an unbalanced split squat where you're kind of wobbling all over the place, you might be better off doing a box squat or a hand-supported split squat. When you're unbalanced, like say doing a Bulgarian dumbbell split squat, your body will inhibit the amount of force it can produce. So if you wonder why the people who look like they do functional training all the time are slow, weak, and don't perform well on the track or on the soccer field, well, maybe they just did too many unstable exercises, never learned how to be very forceful, and that's not really going to help us that much. It's great for general work, but when it comes time to getting stronger, we need to use stable exercises. So that's why I say back squat, box squat, hand-supported split squat. These are all great exercises you could use. You could use all of them if you want. I don't care. But the point is, when it comes time to getting stronger, you got to use stable exercises. During this time, you might introduce depth jumps, depth drops, just more intense plyometrics in general. Go from those low amplitude hops, maybe some bounds on grass. Now we want to ramp it up a little bit. So you might step off a box and land. So that way you can get that landing down, and then when it comes time to progress to depth jumps, you've got the landing and now you're just jumping up onto another box. So this is sort of one of those incremental changes we can make, go from hops to maybe a depth drop and then to a depth jump. Make sense? Special exercises, we still want to target those important areas like calves, hamstrings, hip flexors, and all that, but this is the time of year where you might be able to bring in some eccentric training, isometric training, mix up the tempos. Maybe you go from body weight, slow, earliest in phase 1, then you go to loaded and slow in phase 2, and then you might go to unloaded and fast to loaded and fast as you go to phase 3 and phase 4. But those special exercises, you want to be progressing them just like you progress everything else, and the tempo of these exercises is one way to do that. Once we get into phase 3, this is where we really want to focus on intensifying training, getting a little bit more volume of highly intense training, and start to specify into the most specific types of training. So that way, as we get into phase 4 and then competition, you're not really dealing with anything that's new. You're just manipulating the loading, maybe progressing the exercises a little bit, but it's something that you're comfortable with. This is when we'll be just using the track, other than maybe for bounding and other accessory exercises that we could do on the turf or on grass. We'll be using spikes pretty much every day. The focus is going to be on acceleration, speed, and speed endurance, preferably short speed endurance at this point in the year. Resisted sprints will get deloaded to moderate load sprints, so you could be doing them faster. And we also want to use full or near full rest periods during phase 3. In this phase, an acceleration workout might be a complex of a 20-meter sled pull and a 30-meter acceleration. This could be followed up with bounds with a vest, bounds up the stairs, lateral bounds, lateral hops, split leg hops, things like that. Speed workout during this phase, 3 to 5 by 20-meter flies or 30-meter flies would be good. And we could follow this up with hurdle hops once again, but progress by either increasing the number of hurdles that you jump over or increasing the height. And a speed endurance workout during this period would be 2 by 70, 2 by 90, 1 by 110. This is a good short speed endurance workout, getting you closer to running that full 100-meter distance and then pushing you a little bit over and progressing us well from the intensive tempo that we ran in this range to now running these runs at a true 100% effort the whole way. And then eventually in phase 4, we'll progress beyond our race distance to do long speed endurance or special endurance. You might follow up this speed endurance workout with speed bounds. So whereas before we could be doing endurance bounds or bounding with a vest, now we might do speed bounds where you get a little bit of an acceleration into it. Then when you hit the start line, you're bounding as fast as you can, moving as fast as you can, but still getting that nice long bounding type of movement. In phase 3 for lifting, we're really going to focus on power, rate of force development, and just, producing a lot of force, but at faster velocities than what we were doing prior to this period. We use moderate variation, not a whole wide range of exercises. We just want to get good at what we're good at. Make a little bit of variation if we're getting sluggish or not seeing improvement in a certain exercise, but otherwise if you keep improving, keep doing what you're doing. We will want to increase the volume of plyometrics. We also want to do things like take the box squat that we were doing, maybe deload the weight on the bar a little bit but add bands, so that way we're accelerating out of the bottom faster, and then at the top having to accelerate the bar all the way through and be explosive all the way through the movement. But the whole movement itself will be performed at a higher velocity than if you were using a higher load with metal weight on the bar. So that's one way that we can progress into this period. Reps during this period are going to drop to 2 or 3 on main lifts, mainly because you can't really do more than 3 reps at a time that are very high intensity. In the gym at this point in the year, we should be really focused on producing power and moving fast, moving with intensity. So we don't want to be doing rep ranges that make us sluggish. We can do endurance training if we want, but that's not the point of this work. The point of this work is to improve the amount of force we produce and to produce that force at high velocities. So therefore, we need to be fresh each set that we do, each rep that we do. So we're going to be sticking with 2 to 3 reps in this time of the year. Now, as we finish off and we get into phase 4 of the preseason, this is, basically your pre-competitive phase. This is where everything is sort of being blended together. We want to take the acceleration training, the speed training, and the speed endurance training and bring them all together into one consistent run, one, well-structured, holistic capability of being able to sprint from a crouch start to upright sprinting and then maintain through the line. To do that, we have to start blending things. So we might blend acceleration with speed work or speed work with speed endurance work. So that way we're getting these factors together and we're not just keeping them completely separated so that the only time you ever come out of blocks is only to 20 meters and the only time you ever reach top speed is when you do a relaxed acceleration into a 30-meter fly. That's not going to set you up for success the best. That's good at one point in the year, but when it comes time to get ready for competition, we need to be able to do one run with all of those qualities and do them all well. So this is where in phase 4, I think we could start blending things together a little bit. We don't want to blend extensive tempo with max velocity sprinting, but we could blend, like I said, acceleration and speed endurance, speed and speed endurance. Those factors that are closely related and all at a very high intensity, we can bring them together. We do want to increase the volume of the high intensity sprinting that we're doing during this period. So we're not competing yet in phase 4, so we're able to still push the boundaries on how much volume we can handle. As you get done with phase 4 and you're about to compete, you want to really deload and let the body just recover and then you'll be fine. But when we're still training and we're still preparing for the competitive season, we're not in it yet. When we're still preparing, we do want to ramp up those volumes of work. And, as long as we're not dead every day and seeing our times just get worse and worse and worse at practice, we can be pushing the boundary, increasing the volume that you run, maybe add a rep, maybe add 10, 20 meters to the runs that you're doing. Little adjustments like that can have a potent effect if compiled over time. Example workouts during phase 4, you could do 6x40 accelerations. This will blend speed and acceleration into one at this distance, so I think this is a great workout when you're sort of almost getting time to peak. For flies, we could do, a 30-meter acceleration into a 30-meter fly. Preferably at this point in the year, you want that acceleration to be pretty much all out. So that way, like I said, we're being as specific as possible for the race that we're preparing to run. If it's indoor, you're trying to run a 60. So if you're doing a 30-meter fly and a 30-meter acceleration, you could just call it a 60. But sometimes, mentally it's easier to think of getting up, and then boom, go. So you could call it a fly and set it up that way. That's just the art of coaching right there. For speed endurance, since we're doing long speed endurance, a 60 or 100 meter runner, they might do 1x150, 1x120, 1x110, 1x100. You could do 3x150. You could do 200, 150, 100. You could do whatever you want. But this is the time of year where we do want to be doing over distance sprinting beyond the distance of your event. And if you're a 60 meter or 100 meter runner, it's going to be in that 100 to 150 range that we want to keep this work. For the strength training in phase 4, we really want to shift the force velocity profile toward velocity. And we're going to do this by deloading exercises, moving as fast as we can, managing rest and recovery so we're not too fatigued. And then we might even use assisted things like assisted jumps, a band assisted jump. On the track, we could be running with the wind, whereas maybe earlier in the year we're running into the wind. We want to focus on whatever it is that we can do to shift toward more velocity. That's what we want to do in phase 4. Across the board, not a whole lot is going to change here. The exercises might progress a little bit. You might go from doing a depth jump where you drop and go right onto a box to maybe you hit the ground, jump over a hurdle, and then you jump up onto a box. Adding a little complexity, but not really changing the movement itself. You don't need to, throw the baby out with the bathwater at this point of the year and completely change things. In fact, I would argue that changing things at this point is not a very good idea because when you change exercises, you tend to get sore and stiff. We don't want to get sore and stiff when we have to run fast and compete. So do what you know won't hurt you and hopefully what will help you. And then aside from that, when it's phase 4, when you're getting ready to compete, do the sprint work you need to do as much as you need to do. Only do enough lifting to, help. Don't do enough to make you worse, make you tired, make you hurt. And then go home and relax and sleep and eat. If you do all that, you're probably going to be fine. If you've progressed, like we've discussed here, from phase 1 to phase 4, going from more general, slower, lower rest to faster, more intense, more specific, more rest. If you do that general progression throughout your preseason, I think you're going to be set up well, and you can intuitively figure out what you need to do based on that sort of progression. As long as you do what is logical to you and makes sense based on your event, if you progress in a way that takes you from where you are now to where you need to be, I guarantee that it'll turn out well, and you'll have a good time, you'll compete well, you'll have fun, and you'll have something you could look back on later in life and say, hey, I'm glad I did it. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you appreciate this video and got something out of it. While you're here, please hit a thumbs up if you like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone. It really helps the channel grow. Also, like I said, I got workouts, programs on my website, sprintingworkouts.com. Got videos on my Instagram at ATHLETE.X. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. Me or someone else will probably respond. Thank you guys for tuning in. This is Cody Bidlow with sprintingworkouts.com, signing off.